Christmas Eve at our company holiday party should have been magical. Instead, I stood frozen in my husband's corner office watching James pace behind his mahogany desk while his 22-year-old girlfriend Sarah smirked from the leather chair that should have been mine. The twinkling city lights beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows felt like a cruel joke as James delivered his ultimatum publicly, apologized to Sarah for making her uncomfortable at work, or lose my upcoming promotion to vice president of marketing and face immediate salary cuts. My heart shattered as I realized Sarah wasn't just wearing my husband's attention, she was wearing the diamond necklace I'd seen in his browser history, the one meant to be my Christmas gift. The words hung in the air like poison gas. 3 years of marriage, 6 years of building this company together, and James was choosing her over me. Sarah sat there with her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the armrest, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders as she watched my world crumble. She looked nothing like the eager intern I'd mentored 8 months ago, the girl who'd asked me endless questions about marketing strategies and begged for extra responsibilities. My mind raced back to how we'd met at Harvard Business School. James had been the charming entrepreneur with big dreams, and I'd been the strategic thinker who could make those dreams reality. We'd spent countless nights in the library, planning his family's tech company expansion, sketching our future on coffee-stained napkins. I'd turned down Google's 6-figure offer to join his startup because I believed in us and what we could accomplish together. But standing here now, watching Sarah's triumphant expression, I understood that our partnership had been an illusion. She'd been systematically undermining my projects for months, I realized. The Peterson account that mysteriously shifted to her supervision. The quarterly marketing presentation where my innovative social media strategy suddenly became her brilliant idea. The client meetings where she'd somehow inserted herself as the primary contact. Through the glass wall, I spotted Robert James's father and company founder watching our confrontation with deep lines of concern etched across his weathered face. His silver hair caught the overhead lights as he shook his head slowly, clearly displeased with his son's behavior. Robert had always treated me with respect, often seeking my opinion on strategic decisions and praising my analytical approach to market expansion. Sarah leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Melody, I know this is difficult, but James and I really think it would be best for everyone if you could just acknowledge that your jealousy has been affecting the workplace dynamic." Jealousy. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I wasn't jealous of her youth or her relationship with my husband. I was furious at the calculated way she'd dismantled my career while I'd been blind to her manipulations. The late nights she'd volunteered to stay and help James with projects. The business dinners she'd somehow become essential to attend. The gradual shift from calling me Mrs. Patterson to simply Melody, then barely acknowledging me at all. James cleared his throat, straightening his tie nervously. "Melody, you have to understand this is business. Sarah has brought fresh perspectives to our marketing approach, and frankly, some of your strategies have been feeling outdated lately." Outdated. My strategies had increased company revenue by 37% in the past year alone. My digital transformation initiative had streamlined our client acquisition process and reduced operational costs by nearly $200,000. But apparently, Sarah's fresh perspective trumped measurable results. I thought about the London expansion project I'd been developing in secret for the past 6 months. Late nights at home researching European markets, analyzing competitor strategies, building comprehensive financial projections. I'd planned to present it to the board after the new year as my signature achievement, the project that would solidify my promotion and prove my value to the company. Now looking at James's expectant face and Sarah's barely concealed glee, I realized that project might be my lifeline instead of my triumph. "So, what's it going to be, Melody?" James asked, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he'd perfected since taking over as CEO 2 years ago. "Are you going to apologize to Sarah and accept that your role here needs to evolve, or are we going to have a problem?" The diamond necklace around Sarah's neck caught the light again, and something cold and calculating settled in my chest. She'd taken my husband, my projects, and now she wanted my dignity too. But she'd underestimated one crucial thing about me. I'd built my career on strategic thinking and careful planning. If she thought I'd crumble under pressure, she'd made a serious miscalculation. I looked directly at James, my voice steady and calm despite the storm raging inside me. Okay. The single word seemed to surprise him. He'd been expecting tears, pleading, maybe even anger. Instead, I'd given him exactly what he'd asked for, while my mind began formulating the most important strategy of my career. Sarah's smile widened, but she had no idea that my agreement was the first move in a plan that would change everything. As I walked toward the door, I caught Robert's eye through the glass. He nodded slightly, and I wondered if he could see something in my expression that his son had missed. James and Sarah were already turning away, discussing their holiday plans as if I'd ceased to exist. They had no idea that by tomorrow morning, their world would be completely different. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt like descending into a different reality. 23 floors down, each one marking another step away from the life I thought I'd been building. The underground parking level was eerily quiet on Christmas Eve, my heels echoing against the concrete as I walked to my silver BMW. The luxury car had been a gift from James for our second wedding anniversary, back when he still believed in grand gestures and shared dreams. I drove through the empty streets toward our penthouse apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel as my mind shifted into tactical mode. The building's doorman Carlos wished me a Merry Christmas with genuine warmth, unaware that he was witnessing the end of an era. The private elevator carried me to the 32nd floor, where our 2,000-square-foot apartment awaited with its panoramic city views and carefully curated modern decor. Everything in this space reflected our supposed partnership. The abstract paintings we'd selected together at gallery openings, the Italian leather furniture we'd spent weeks choosing, the kitchen island where we'd planned company strategies over morning coffee. Now it all felt like props in a play where I'd been unknowingly performing the role of the naive wife, while the real drama unfolded behind my back. I moved through the apartment with methodical precision, retrieving files from my home office that I'd assembled over months of careful preparation. The London expansion proposal wasn't just a project, it was a comprehensive business plan that could revolutionize our entire European presence. I'd researched everything from local market conditions to regulatory requirements, from potential partnerships to staffing structures. The document represented hundreds of hours of analysis, and it was entirely my creation. Opening James's laptop, I accessed our shared files to gather additional research. That's when I discovered the folder labeled Personal, buried deep in his directory structure. My hands trembled as I clicked through credit card statements showing expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never visited together, hotel receipts from business trips where Sarah had somehow become an essential travel companion, jewelry purchases that explained not only the necklace she'd worn tonight, but several other gifts I'd never received. 4 months. The receipts painted a clear timeline spanning 4 months of deception, while I'd been working late to develop strategies for our company's growth. James had been building an entirely different kind of partnership with my former mentee. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd anticipated, not because I still loved him romantically, but because I'd trusted him with my professional future. But Sarah's calculation had been more sophisticated than simple romantic manipulation. Digging deeper into the files, I found documents that revealed her true strategy. Performance reviews where she'd subtly undermined my contributions. Meeting notes where she'd positioned herself as the innovative thinker while characterizing my approaches as conventional. Email threads where she'd redirected client communications to her own accounts, gradually assuming control of relationships I'd spent years building. She hadn't just stolen my husband, she'd been systematically stealing my career, one strategic move at a time. The realization should have devastated me, but instead it crystallized my resolve. Sarah had played a sophisticated game, but she'd made one critical error. She'd underestimated her opponent. I began packing with the same methodical approach I brought to project management. Essential documents, first including contracts, financial records, and personal credentials. My most valuable possessions weren't the jewelry or designer clothes James had bought me, but the intellectual property I'd developed independently. My portfolio of successful campaigns, market analyses, and strategic frameworks would serve me well wherever I landed next. The apartment felt different as I moved through it, no longer a home, but a temporary staging area for my next phase. I drafted 3 separate letters: a resignation from my current position, a formal request for immediate transfer to establish our London office, and a personal note to Robert, explaining the situation without betraying James's trust completely. If I was going to burn bridges, I'd do it professionally and strategically. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Hope you understand this is what's best for everyone. See you in the morning to discuss your new role." New role. The condescension in those words fueled my determination. He'd offered me a demotion wrapped in corporate language, expecting gratitude for allowing me to remain in a diminished position. Sarah had probably already started planning how to redecorate my current office, anticipating her swift ascension to my former responsibilities. As I sealed boxes of personal items, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. James thought he'd cornered me, forced me to choose between dignity and financial security. Sarah believed she'd successfully eliminated her primary competition for both romantic and professional advancement. Neither of them realized that my okay had been the opening move in a strategy they never saw coming. The city sparkled beyond our windows, Christmas lights creating a tapestry of hope across the urban landscape. Families were gathering for holiday celebrations, exchanging gifts and sharing dreams for the year ahead. In a few hours, I'd be starting a completely different kind of Christmas morning, one that would reshape everything I thought I knew about my own capabilities and ambitions. At 3 a.m, I placed a call that would change everything. Robert answered on the second ring, his voice alert, despite the early hour. "Melody, is everything all right?" "Robert, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. What's on your mind?" "Is there really a place for me in this company, or should I start looking elsewhere?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. "Can you meet me at the office in 2 hours? There are some things we need to discuss in person." The company building at dawn felt like a cathedral of possibility rather than the corporate prison it had seemed 12 hours earlier. Robert's assistant had already prepared coffee in his executive conference room, the rich aroma filling the space as winter sunlight streamed through the eastern windows. At 71, Robert maintained the vigorous energy that had built Patterson Technologies from a garage startup into a multinational corporation, his piercing blue eyes reflecting both wisdom and barely contained frustration. "I've been watching this situation develop for weeks," he began, without preamble, his fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug that read "World's Greatest Grandfather" in faded letters. "James thinks he's been subtle, but corporate romance rarely stays hidden, especially when it involves someone systematically undermining one of our most valuable employees." The validation hit me like a wave of relief. For months, I'd questioned my own perceptions, wondering if I was being paranoid or overly sensitive. Hearing Robert acknowledge the situation felt like emerging from a hall of mirrors where reality had been constantly shifting. "You built the digital marketing infrastructure that doubled our client retention rate," Robert continued, pulling up financial reports on his tablet. "Your social media campaigns generated $3.7 million in direct revenue last quarter alone. The strategic partnerships you negotiated with emerging tech startups positioned us ahead of competitors who are still trying to catch up with trends you identified 18 months ago." He slid a folder across the polished table. Inside were performance metrics. I'd never seen detailed analyses of my contributions compared to other executives in similar positions across the industry. The numbers painted a picture of exceptional achievement that James had never acknowledged, accomplishments that Sarah had been slowly claiming credit for through careful documentation manipulation. James doesn't know about these reports, Robert said quietly. The board commissioned an independent analysis of all executive performance after our quarterly review showed some concerning discrepancies in project attribution. Your work has been significantly undervalued in internal communications, while certain other contributions have been dramatically overstated. Sarah's sabotage had been even more systematic than I'd realized. She'd not only stolen credit for my ideas, but had actively worked to diminish the perceived value of my achievements. The folder contained email threads where she'd subtly questioned my strategic decisions in communications with board members, painting herself as the voice of innovation, while characterizing my approaches as outdated or overly cautious. "There's something else," Robert said, his expression growing more serious. "We've been monitoring unusual data access patterns over the past 3 months. Someone has been downloading proprietary client information and market research outside normal business hours." The digital forensics team traced the activity to Sarah's login credentials. Corporate espionage. The words hung between us like a toxic cloud. Sarah hadn't just been positioning herself for advancement within our company, she'd been stealing information that could benefit competitors or serve her own future endeavors. The scope of her deception far exceeded romantic manipulation or office politics. "Why haven't you addressed this already?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Robert's jaw tightened. "Because my son is sleeping with the perpetrator and confronting him about his girlfriend's criminal activity requires delicate handling. James has been making increasingly poor decisions since he assumed the CEO position, and this situation has become a test of his judgment and leadership capabilities." The revelation that Robert had been watching James's performance with growing concern added another layer to an already complex situation. This wasn't just about a husband cheating on his wife or an ambitious employee undermining her supervisor. This was about the future leadership of a company that employed over 2,000 people and generated hundreds of millions in annual revenue. "I need to tell you something," Robert said, reaching for another folder I hadn't noticed. "6 months ago, the board began discussing succession planning. James assumed he would automatically inherit my position when I retire, but leadership isn't hereditary, especially in a competitive marketplace where poor decisions can cost millions." The folder contained preliminary discussions about restructuring the company's executive hierarchy, with particular focus on identifying leaders who demonstrated both strategic vision and operational excellence. My name appeared frequently in board meeting notes along with detailed analysis of my potential for expanded responsibilities. "We've been considering offering you the position of European Operations Director," Robert continued. "The role would involve relocating to London to establish our first permanent international headquarters. Full autonomy over the European market, direct board reporting, and complete independence from the American office structure." London. The word resonated like a bell, perfectly aligning with the expansion proposal I'd been developing in secret. Robert wasn't just offering me an escape from an impossible personal situation. He was offering me the opportunity to build something entirely my own, away from James's interference and Sarah's manipulation. "The compensation package would reflect the scope of responsibilities," Robert added, sliding another document across the table. "Base salary of $400,000 annually, plus performance bonuses, stock options, and comprehensive relocation assistance. You'd essentially be building our European division from the ground up." The offer represented more than financial advancement. It was recognition of my capabilities and potential validation that my contributions had genuine value beyond the diminished role James had tried to assign me. Most importantly, it was a chance to prove myself in an environment where my achievements couldn't be stolen or minimized by office politics. "There's one more thing," Robert said, his voice carrying a note of personal disappointment. "James doesn't have the authority to demote you or reduce your salary. Personnel decisions at the executive level require board approval, and we've already signed off on your promotion to Vice President of Marketing effective January 1st. His ultimatum last night exceeded his actual authority. The manipulation had been even more extensive than I'd realized. James had used my personal relationship with him to threaten professional consequences. He couldn't actually deliver banking on my emotional response to cloud my understanding of corporate hierarchy. He'd gambled that I wouldn't challenge his authority or verify his claims through proper channels. So when he demanded that I apologize to Sarah or face consequences, he was essentially bluffing completely. And the fact that he would abuse his position to protect someone who's been stealing company information raises serious questions about his fitness for leadership. Robert stood and walked to the window overlooking the city, where his company had grown from ambitious startup to industry leader. The morning sun illuminated his profile, revealing the weight of decisions that would affect not just our family dynamics, but the future of everything he'd built over 4 decades. Melody, I'm not asking you to choose between personal loyalty and professional opportunity. I'm telling you that James has already made that choice for you. The question now is whether you're ready to build something extraordinary or whether you want to stay and watch my son destroy what we've spent years creating. The London offer wasn't just an escape, it was a launching platform for everything I dreamed of achieving. As Robert returned to his chair, I realized this conversation was reshaping not just my immediate future, but my understanding of my own capabilities and worth. When would you need an answer? I asked, though my decision had already crystallized. The board meets in emergency session this afternoon to address the security breach. If you're interested in the London position, we can expedite the process and have you on a plane by tomorrow morning. James and Sarah will be dealing with the consequences of their actions while you're building our future in Europe. Tomorrow morning. The timeline was impossibly fast and absolutely perfect. By the time James woke up expecting an apology tour, I'd be 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, embarking on an adventure that would prove my worth to everyone who'd underestimated me. The board meeting convened at noon in the executive conference room. 7 men and women who controlled the destiny of Patterson Technologies gathering around the mahogany table where strategic decisions shaped the future of thousands of employees. I sat at the far end, my resignation letter and London transfer request neatly stacked before me as Robert presented his findings about the security breach and leadership concerns. Board members asked pointed questions about the data theft, the timeline of events, and the potential impact on client relationships. Dr. Patricia Williams, our longest-serving independent director, expressed particular concern about the breach of fiduciary duty involved in romantic relationships that compromised professional judgment. The questions weren't directed at me, but about me as board members evaluated whether the London position represented a solution to multiple emerging problems. Motion to approve the emergency appointment of Melody Patterson as European Operations Director, effective immediately with full authorization to establish London headquarters and complete operational autonomy over European markets. The motion passed unanimously, 7 votes, transforming my life in less than 30 seconds. Robert's private jet was scheduled for 6 that evening, giving me exactly 6 hours to finalize arrangements and confront the situation at home. The speed felt surreal, like watching my life reorganize in fast forward, but the urgency also prevented second-guessing or emotional backtracking. By tomorrow morning, I'd be walking into a London office with unlimited potential and 0 baggage from my previous life. James was waiting in our apartment when I arrived, his confident demeanor suggesting he expected our conversation to proceed according to his predetermined script. He'd changed from his business attire into casual weekend clothes, clearly anticipating a relaxed discussion about my reduced role and acceptance of the new dynamic between him, me, and Sarah. His laptop was open on the kitchen island, probably reviewing plans for reshaping the marketing department around Sarah's supposed strengths. "I'm glad you came to your senses last night," he said without looking up from his screen. I know the transition might be difficult initially, but once you see how much more efficiently things operate with clear hierarchy and defined roles, you'll understand that this arrangement benefits everyone. Clear hierarchy, defined roles. Corporate speak for demotion and humiliation, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who'd never questioned his own entitlement. James had inherited opportunity rather than earning it, and his assumption that everyone else would accept diminished circumstances for his convenience revealed the depth of his disconnection from reality. I've prepared a revised job description for your new position, he continued, finally glancing up. You'll be Senior Marketing Coordinator, reporting directly to Sarah, who will be assuming the Vice President role effective immediately. The salary adjustment reflects the reduced responsibilities, but you'll still have excellent benefits and potential for growth if you demonstrate adaptability. Senior Marketing Coordinator, reporting to Sarah. The audacity was breathtaking in its complete dismissal of my capabilities and achievements. He'd planned to transform me from an executive into a subordinate of the woman who'd been systematically stealing my work, and my husband. The cruelty was almost artistic in its precision. I placed 3 envelopes on the kitchen island, my resignation, my transfer acceptance and divorce papers that had been expedited through Robert's legal team. James looked at them with confusion, as if documents appearing on his own kitchen counter represented an impossible puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "What's this?" he asked, reaching for the top envelope. "My resignation from my current position, effective immediately. Also, divorce papers, which I think are self-explanatory, and documentation of Sarah's corporate espionage activities, which the board reviewed this morning before voting to terminate her employment and pursue criminal charges." The color drained from James's face as he processed the information. He'd expected negotiation, maybe some emotional resistance, but certainly not a complete strategic counterattack that he hadn't seen coming. His hands shook slightly as he opened the resignation letter and read the formal language, acknowledging the end of our professional relationship. "You can't just quit," he said, his voice carrying a note of panic. "We have contracts, responsibilities, ongoing projects that require your involvement. The board won't approve a sudden departure without proper transition planning. Actually, they already have. I'm leaving for London tonight to establish our European headquarters as the new operations director. The board voted unanimously to approve the position, which comes with significantly expanded authority and compensation compared to what I had here." James stood frozen still, holding my resignation letter, as his brain struggled to process how completely the situation had shifted. He'd planned to diminish my role while elevating Sarah's, but instead he was losing me entirely while Sarah faced criminal prosecution. His careful manipulation had backfired spectacularly. The apartment door burst open and Sarah rushed in without knocking. Her earlier confidence replaced by obvious desperation. She'd clearly received notification of her termination and was seeking James's protection from the legal consequences of her actions. Her designer outfit looked rumpled, and her perfectly styled hair showed signs of frantic hand-running. "James, you have to do something," she pleaded, ignoring my presence entirely. "They're saying I stole information, but I was just being thorough in my research. Everything I accessed was for legitimate business purposes, and now they're talking about criminal charges and industry blacklisting." She finally noticed me standing beside the kitchen island, and her expression shifted from desperation to naked hostility. The mask of professional courtesy she'd maintained for months fell away, revealing the calculating ambition that had driven her systematic campaign against my career and marriage. "This is your fault," she snapped at me. "You couldn't handle being replaced by someone younger and more innovative, so you went crying to Daddy about imaginary problems. James and I have been building something special, and you're just jealous that you couldn't keep up with our vision." The accusation was so detached from reality that I almost laughed. Sarah had stolen proprietary information, manipulated project attributions, and undermined client relationships. But in her mind, she was the victim of professional jealousy rather than the perpetrator of systematic fraud. Her complete inability to acknowledge responsibility revealed the narcissistic foundation of her entire approach. Sarah, I said calmly, you downloaded confidential client data outside business hours, forwarded proprietary research to personal email accounts, and documented conversations with competitors about pricing strategies they shouldn't have known. The digital forensics team has detailed records of every unauthorized access. This isn't about jealousy, it's about criminal activity. James looked back and forth between us, clearly struggling to reconcile the Sarah he'd been romantically involved with and the Sarah who'd been systematically stealing company information. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that his judgment had been catastrophically poor. "Melody, surely we can work something out," he said, his voice carrying a pleading note I'd never heard before. "Maybe there's been some misunderstanding about Sarah's activities. We can address any concerns through internal review rather than involving external authorities." The board has already voted. Sarah's employment is terminated, and the legal department is coordinating with law enforcement about potential charges. As for working something out, I'll be in London, building the European division while you explain to the board how your personal relationship compromised your professional judgment. I gathered my luggage and headed toward the door, leaving James and Sarah to contemplate the wreckage of their poorly planned strategy. They'd believed they could manipulate me into accepting a diminished role while they assumed control of everything I'd built. Instead, they'd triggered a sequence of events that would cost them everything while launching me toward opportunities they'd never imagined. The last thing I heard as the door closed was Sarah's voice raised in anger. "This isn't over, Melody. You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." She was right about one thing. I had no idea what she was capable of. But I was about to discover what I was capable of, and that journey was going to be far more interesting than anything she could threaten. The British Airways flight touched down at Heathrow at 9:15 in the morning London time, and I stepped into a world where my reputation preceded me rather than followed behind explanations and justifications. Margaret Thornton, my new executive assistant, waited in arrivals, holding a sign with my name. Her crisp professionalism immediately establishing the tone for what would become the most productive period of my career. "Ms. Patterson, welcome to London. I've prepared briefing materials for the drive to your office, and your first team meeting is scheduled for 11:30. The temporary housing arrangements are confirmed, and your permanent residence search begins tomorrow with the relocation specialist." The efficiency was remarkable compared to the bureaucratic delays that characterized every initiative in the American office. Within 90 minutes of landing, I was sitting in a corner office, overlooking the Thames, reviewing personnel files for the European team Robert had been quietly assembling over the past 6 months. He'd planned this expansion far more thoroughly than I had realized, positioning the London operation to succeed independently rather than as a subordinate branch of the American headquarters. My team consisted of 12 professionals recruited from competitors across Europe, each bringing expertise in regional markets, regulatory compliance, and cultural adaptation. They'd been waiting for permanent leadership, working on preliminary projects, while Robert searched for the right person to transform his vision into operational reality. Their enthusiasm was infectious, a stark contrast to the cynical territorialism that had poisoned the atmosphere in the American office. "Your predecessor's market analysis identified significant opportunities in the Germanic and Scandinavian regions," explained David Chen, our senior market research analyst. "The preliminary projections suggest we could capture 15 to 20% market share within 18 months if we execute the expansion strategy effectively." David's insights aligned perfectly with the research I'd conducted independently, validating my strategic thinking while providing additional depth to market entry planning. The European team had been developing implementation frameworks that complemented my theoretical analysis, creating synergy that would accelerate our timeline significantly. By the end of my first week, we'd secured preliminary agreements with three major clients who'd been frustrated by the limited European presence of American tech companies. The contracts represented over $2 million in annual revenue, exceeding Robert's most optimistic projections for our first quarter of operations. My team's local expertise combined with my strategic oversight created value propositions that competitors couldn't match. The contrast with my previous situation was striking. Instead of defending my ideas against systematic undermining, I was implementing them with enthusiastic support from professionals who recognized innovation and appreciated collaborative leadership. Instead of fighting for credit, I was sharing success with team members who contributed meaningfully to collective achievements. News from America arrived through carefully worded emails from Robert and increasingly desperate phone calls from James that I declined to answer. The American office was struggling with client defections as major accounts requested transfers to work directly with the London operation. Sarah's termination had created operational disruptions that James was struggling to address, while the ongoing investigation into data theft had damaged the company's reputation with several key partners. The Peterson Industries contract specifically requested continuation under London management, Margaret informed me during our weekly review. Their CMO expressed concerns about working with the American office following recent personnel changes. Should I finalize the transfer paperwork? Peterson Industries represented one of our most prestigious accounts, generating nearly $800,000 annually. Their preference for London operations validated not only my personal reputation, but the superior professional environment I'd been working to create. James had unknowingly triggered a chain reaction that was strengthening the European division while weakening his own position. 3 weeks into my London tenure, Robert called with updates that demonstrated how completely the situation had reversed. The board is questioning James's judgment more seriously than I'd anticipated. Losing the Peterson account was bad enough, but 3 other major clients have requested European management, and the revenue shift is becoming impossible to ignore. The American office's declining performance wasn't entirely attributable to my departure, but my absence had exposed operational weaknesses that had been masked by my contributions. Without my strategic thinking and client relationship management, James was struggling to maintain the growth trajectory that had justified his promotion to CEO. There's something else, Robert continued. Sarah's legal situation has escalated. The prosecutor's office found evidence that she was selling information to competitors, not just gathering intelligence. The charges now include wire fraud and commercial espionage with potential federal implications. Sarah's downfall was more comprehensive than anyone had anticipated. Her systematic information theft had generated income through direct sales to competitors, transforming simple corporate espionage into a sophisticated criminal enterprise. The investigation had uncovered bank accounts, encrypted communications, and detailed records of proprietary information transfers that painted a picture of calculated betrayal spanning nearly a year. How is James handling the publicity? I asked, though I suspected the answer. Poorly. The trade publications are covering the story extensively, and his romantic relationship with the perpetrator has become central to the narrative. The board is considering whether his position is sustainable given the reputational damage. James was learning that personal decisions have professional consequences, especially for leaders whose judgment affects entire organizations. His choice to elevate Sarah over me had backfired, spectacularly damaging not only his marriage, but his credibility as a corporate executive capable of making sound strategic decisions. Meanwhile, my London operation was exceeding every benchmark Robert had established. Our 4th week concluded with signed contracts totaling $3.8 million, staff hiring completed ahead of schedule, and preliminary expansion plans approved for Edinburgh and Dublin offices. The European market was responding enthusiastically to our localized approach and superior service delivery. Your success is reshaping our entire corporate strategy, Robert told me during our monthly video conference. The board is discussing whether London should become our primary international headquarters with expanded authority over global operations outside North America. The proposition represented a complete reversal of traditional corporate hierarchy. Instead of American executives managing international subsidiaries, the European operation would become the dominant force in global expansion, with resources and authority exceeding even the original headquarters. My strategic vision was becoming the foundation for the company's future growth. James finally reached me through the office switchboard, his voice carrying exhaustion and desperation I'd never heard before. Melody, we need to talk. Things have gotten complicated here, and I think there might be opportunities for reconciliation if we can work through our differences. Reconciliation. The word felt hollow after everything that had transpired. James wasn't seeking genuine resolution. He was seeking rescue from consequences he'd created through poor judgment and selfish decisions. My success in London had demonstrated that I didn't need his approval or partnership to achieve extraordinary results. James, I'm building something remarkable here, and it doesn't include looking backward toward situations that diminished my potential. I hope you figure out your legal and professional challenges, but my focus is entirely on European expansion now. The conversation ended with mutual understanding that our paths had diverged permanently. James would continue dealing with the wreckage of his choices while I built the most successful international operation in our industry's history. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or satisfying. 3 months later, the emergency board meeting convened in my London conference room, marking the first time in company history that strategic decisions would be made outside American headquarters. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone as board members flew across the Atlantic to review quarterly performance reports that revealed a fundamental shift in corporate power dynamics. James sat at the opposite end of the polished table, his usual confidence replaced by the hollow expression of someone watching their assumptions crumble in real time. The quarterly reports painted a devastating picture. American operations down 23%, European operations up 147%, with major client defections continuing as companies specifically requested London management for their accounts. The numbers speak for themselves, announced Dr. Patricia Williams, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd guided corporate restructuring for 3 decades. European operations have generated more revenue in 3 months than American operations produced in the previous 6 months, while operational costs remain significantly lower due to superior efficiency and client satisfaction. The reversal was more dramatic than anyone had projected. My European team had not only met ambitious targets, but had fundamentally redefined what was possible when strategic vision aligned with operational excellence. We'd captured market share from established competitors, developed innovative service delivery models, and created client relationships based on measurable value rather than historical inertia. James attempted to defend his performance by citing market conditions and transitional challenges, but his explanations sounded increasingly desperate as board members reviewed specific examples of missed opportunities and operational failures. The Peterson Industries defection had triggered a cascade of client departures that revealed underlying weaknesses in his leadership approach. "The question before us," said Robert, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years building the company, "is whether we continue operating under traditional hierarchical assumptions or whether we acknowledge that our European division has become the driving force of our global success." The proposal was breathtaking in its scope, restructuring the entire corporation with London as primary headquarters, promoting me to global CEO with authority over all international operations, and reassigning James to regional director of North American operations under my supervision. The complete inversion of traditional corporate structure reflected the dramatic shift in operational performance. James's face cycled through multiple emotions as the implications became clear. His assumption that he would inherit leadership of the family company had been shattered by his own poor judgment and strategic failures. The son, who'd expected automatic succession, was being offered a subordinate position, reporting to his former wife, contingent on demonstrating renewed commitment to corporate values and professional excellence. This is temporary insanity, James said, his voice rising with frustration. You're restructuring a 4-decade-old company based on 3 months of European performance that might not be sustainable long-term. Melody's success could be anomalous, driven by favorable market conditions rather than superior leadership. The accusation that my achievements were anomalous rather than substantive revealed how completely James misunderstood both my capabilities and the strategic principles underlying successful business operations. His inability to acknowledge merit when it contradicted his expectations demonstrated the same blindness that had led him to elevate Sarah over me initially. James, I said, speaking directly to him for the first time since arriving in London. European operations have generated 43 million Oslers in revenue over 12 weeks, established partnerships with 7 major multinational corporations, and achieved client satisfaction ratings that exceed industry standards by 37%. Those results aren't anomalous. They're the product of strategic planning and operational excellence. The board members nodded appreciatively as I outlined the systematic approach that had driven European success. Unlike the personal attacks and manipulation that had characterized interactions in the American office, this was a professional discussion based on measurable outcomes and strategic analysis. The contrast highlighted how toxic the previous environment had been and how liberating it felt to operate in a context where merit determined advancement. Robert presented the final element of the restructuring proposal, a comprehensive review of all executive appointments based on performance metrics rather than traditional hierarchies. The evaluation would determine not only James's future role, but the entire leadership structure needed to support global expansion and sustainable growth. Your father is right, I told James, my voice carrying genuine sympathy rather than vindictiveness. This restructuring represents an opportunity for you to prove your capabilities in a defined scope where you can focus on rebuilding North American operations without the complexities of global management. The position I was offering him was actually quite generous, considering his recent performance. Regional Director carried significant responsibilities and authority within the North American market, with potential for advancement based on demonstrated results. It was a chance for redemption rather than punishment, though it required acknowledging that leadership must be earned through achievement rather than inheritance. James struggled visibly with the decision, his pride warring with practical recognition of his limited options. The board had made clear that restructuring was proceeding with or without his cooperation, and refusing the regional director position would likely result in much less favorable alternatives. I need guarantees about operational autonomy and resource allocation, James said. Finally, his negotiation attempt revealing acceptance of the new reality. If I'm going to rebuild the North American division, I need authority to make necessary personnel changes and strategic decisions without micromanagement from London. His request was reasonable and demonstrated understanding that successful regional management required independence within defined parameters. The negotiation represented the first constructive conversation we'd had in months, focusing on professional requirements rather than personal grievances or power struggles. Full operational autonomy for North American markets. I agreed, with quarterly performance reviews and resource allocation based on demonstrated results. You'll have the authority to restructure your team, develop regional strategies, and pursue market opportunities that align with global corporate objectives. The agreement represented a fresh start for both of us, though, in dramatically different contexts than either had anticipated. James would have the opportunity to prove his leadership capabilities in a clearly defined scope, while I assumed responsibility for global strategic direction and international expansion. The arrangement separated our personal and professional relationships in ways that benefited both individual careers and overall corporate performance. Sarah's legal troubles had continued escalating during the quarter, with federal charges and industry blacklisting destroying any possibility of future employment in technology sectors. Her systematic information theft had generated criminal penalties and civil liability that would affect her for years to come. The consequences served as a stark reminder that professional misconduct carried serious long-term implications regardless of short-term gains. As the board meeting concluded with unanimous approval of the restructuring plan, I realized that the worst night of my life had catalyzed the most extraordinary period of professional achievement I'd ever imagined. James's ultimatum on Christmas Eve had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my marriage and career, ultimately leading to opportunities that exceeded my most ambitious original goals. The transition wouldn't be simple, but the foundation had been established for sustainable success based on merit, strategic thinking, and collaborative leadership. My European team had proven that excellence was achievable when talented professionals operated in supportive environments with clear objectives and mutual respect. 6 months later, I stood in my corner office overlooking the Thames at sunset, reviewing quarterly reports that confirmed what everyone had hoped, but few had dared predict. Our global restructuring had transformed Patterson Technologies into the most dynamic and profitable company in our sector. European operations had expanded into 12 countries. North American operations had returned to growth under James's focused regional leadership, and our innovative service delivery model was being studied by business schools as a case study in strategic transformation. The London headquarters buzzed with energy that I'd never experienced in traditional corporate environments. My team of 43 professionals represented the best talent from across Europe and beyond, united by shared commitment to excellence and appreciation for collaborative leadership that recognized individual contributions while pursuing collective success. The culture we'd built attracted exceptional candidates who specifically sought opportunities to work in environments where merit determined advancement and innovation drove decision-making. My personal life had evolved as dramatically as my professional circumstances. Dinner that evening was with Harrison Whitfield, the British entrepreneur whose sustainable technology startup had become one of our most successful strategic partnerships. Our relationship had developed naturally over months of professional collaboration, growing into personal connection based on mutual respect and shared values rather than convenience or desperate rebound dynamics. "The quarterly numbers are remarkable," Harrison said, reviewing the reports I'd shared during our meal at a quiet restaurant near the London Bridge. 43% growth in 6 months suggests you've identified scalable strategies that could redefine industry standards permanently rather than temporarily. Harrison understood both business strategy and personal relationships in ways that had been absent from my marriage with James. Our conversations ranged from market analysis to travel dreams, from operational challenges to family aspirations with equal comfort, discussing quarterly projections and weekend plans for exploring British countryside villages. The contrast with my previous life was striking, not because Harrison was superior to James as a person, but because our relationship was built on genuine partnership rather than assumed roles or traditional expectations. He encouraged my ambitions while pursuing his own, creating synergy that enhanced both individual achievements and shared experiences. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Board meeting next week to finalize the Asia-Pacific expansion proposal. Tokyo operations could launch by autumn if you're ready for the next challenge." Tokyo, the opportunity represented another exponential leap forward, establishing Patterson Technologies as the first truly global technology services company with autonomous regional operations on 3 continents. The strategic vision I'd outlined 18 months ago was becoming reality faster than anyone had anticipated, driven by proven results and systematic expansion methodology. James had surprised everyone, including himself, by demonstrating genuine leadership capabilities, once freed from the pressure of managing global operations beyond his experience level. North American revenue had recovered completely. Several key clients had renewed contracts under his management, and his team respected his focused approach to regional market development. Our quarterly video conferences were professional and productive, with none of the tension that had characterized our personal interactions during the marriage. "Your father was right about the succession planning," I told him during our last call. "Leadership isn't hereditary, but it can be developed when people are willing to learn from their mistakes and commit to continuous improvement." James had acknowledged his errors without defensiveness, recognizing that his assumption of automatic advancement had blinded him to the work required for effective leadership. His romantic relationship with Sarah had been symptomatic of broader judgment failures that extended far beyond personal decisions into professional strategy and personnel management. Sarah herself had become a cautionary tale within the technology industry, serving 18 months in federal prison for commercial espionage while facing civil liability that would affect her financial situation for years to come. Her systematic information theft had generated criminal conviction and industry blacklisting that eliminated any possibility of future employment in technology sectors. The consequences demonstrated that professional misconduct carried serious long-term implications, regardless of short-term gains achieved through deception. The legal proceedings had revealed the full scope of her criminal enterprise, including direct sales of proprietary information to 3 competitors and sophisticated identity theft targeting client accounts. Her activities had endangered not only Patterson Technologies, but several partner companies whose confidential data she'd accessed and monetized through illegal channels. Robert had officially announced his retirement effective at the end of the year, with complete confidence that global operations would continue thriving under my leadership. His decision to trust me with the company's future represented validation that exceeded any formal recognition or financial compensation. The man who'd built Patterson Technologies from garage startup to international corporation believed that I could take his life's work to heights he'd never imagined. "You've proven that strategic vision combined with operational excellence can transform industries," Robert had said during our final transition meeting. "The company is positioned for sustained growth that could continue for decades if you maintain the standards and culture you've established." The culture was perhaps our greatest achievement, creating work environments where talented professionals could achieve their potential without political maneuvering or systematic undermining. The London office had become a model for how technology companies could operate when leadership focused on results rather than relationships, merit rather than manipulation. My team had grown to include some of the most sought-after talent in European technology sectors, professionals who specifically sought opportunities to work in environments where innovation was encouraged and achievements were recognized. The reputation we'd built attracted candidates from competitors who offered higher salaries but couldn't match our collaborative culture and growth opportunities. Standing by the window as London's evening lights began twinkling across the urban landscape, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 18 months ago, I'd been trapped in a diminishing marriage and stagnant career, accepting limitations that reflected other people's insecurities rather than my own capabilities. The Christmas Eve ultimatum that had seemed like the worst possible outcome had actually been the catalyst for discovering potential I'd never fully recognized. The lesson wasn't about revenge or proving others wrong, though both had been satisfying in measured doses. The deeper insight was about recognizing your own worth and having the courage to pursue opportunities that align with your actual capabilities rather than other people's comfort levels. James's attempt to diminish my role had forced me to articulate and demonstrate my real value, ultimately leading to achievements that exceeded anything I'd considered possible. My phone rang with Harrison's distinctive ringtone, and his voice carried the warmth that had become the soundtrack to this new phase of life. "Darling, I know you're probably reviewing reports and planning your next corporate conquest, but the evening is too beautiful to spend entirely indoors. Fancy a walk along the Thames? I have champagne and Chinese takeaway, and I'd rather celebrate your latest successes with you than let you work until midnight again." The invitation perfectly captured the balance I'd found between ambitious professional goals and genuine personal relationships. Harrison supported my achievements while encouraging me to enjoy the fruits of my labor, creating space for both individual accomplishments and shared experiences that enriched life beyond corporate success. As I gathered my things and prepared to leave the office, I realized that the most important lesson from this entire experience wasn't about career advancement or financial success, though both had been gratifying. The crucial insight was about recognizing when situations diminish your potential and having the courage to pursue alternatives that honor your actual capabilities and aspirations. Sometimes the people who claim to know you best are actually the most blind to your real potential, limited by their own insecurities and assumptions about what you're capable of achieving. The greatest gift you can give yourself is the willingness to seek environments where your talents can flourish without political constraints or systematic undermining. True success comes not from enduring toxic situations with grace, but from recognizing your worth and creating circumstances that allow your potential to manifest fully. The best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's building something so extraordinary that their initial judgment becomes irrelevant to your continued growth and happiness. My London office went dark as I headed home to Harrison and champagne and conversations that ranged from quarterly projections to travel dreams, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities in a life I'd built through strategic thinking, courageous decisions, and unwavering commitment to my own potential. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to make you feel small, only to discover that their limitations had nothing to do with your actual capabilities? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you found the courage to pursue opportunities that others couldn't see or didn't want to acknowledge. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more tales of triumph over workplace drama and relationship betrayal. Share this video with anyone who needs encouragement to recognize their own worth and pursue the success they deserve. Thank you for joining me on this journey from Christmas Eve ultimatum to global CEO. Remember that your potential is limited only by your willingness to pursue it, regardless of who believes in you or who tries to hold you back. Until next time, keep building the life you actually deserve, not the one others think you should accept.